I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
All right. Welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you are new, I want to let you know that Sabby Sabs podcast is also a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays for the Sabby and JB show. And you can catch me here on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday. Shout out to everyone watching on Rockfin, Rumble, Twitter, and YouTube. And welcome, guys. Apologies for starting later. There was actually like 5 people live streaming at the same time at one point tonight. I was like, holy crap, there's so many people live right now. It didn't make sense for me to start at 7, so I figured I'd just push it back. So here we are. So welcome back, guys. I'm actually going to dive right in because I have 5 stories to discuss tonight. If you have not had a chance to do so, check out that interview I did with Chris Hedges that posted earlier today. Tomorrow, I actually have 2 interviews as well. So there will be more interviews coming for you later on this week. I'm recording those interviews tomorrow, so they'll post later. And then also, this Thursday, I will not be live because I'm actually going to be attending a talk at the Community Church of Boston. Max Blumenthal is actually the guest speaker, and he's going to talk about his documentary, Killing Gaza. So myself and my producer, Eric, will be attending that event. So they actually reached out to me and told me they would like for me to come, the people at the church. So I'll be going to that, but there'll be plenty of clips for you to watch on Thursday, and then you'll see me again on Friday. So let's go ahead and dive right in. I want to go ahead and give a quick shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Thank you guys so much for your support. You're really holding up the fort out here. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: Ultimate, Sabinators. There's also Sabsters, and of course, Sabbies. And last but not least, there are members. All of their names are listed here. You can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen there on the ticker. And I want to give a special shout out to a new Sabby patron. Over here, we call them newbies. Let's give it up for Tamara Lynn. Welcome to the fam. I got to ask you guys a question and be honest with me. Oh, I had another tab open. Whoops. How do you feel about this shirt? You know, this is my first time wearing wings, so I feel like I can fly. I don't know. Like, I forgot who I showed this to. It might have been my husband, but someone told me, they were like, you look like you got wings. If I had wings, I could fly. Let me contemplate. Regulators, mound up. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get into that thumbnail to show you what we're going to be discussing tonight. Oh, dear, I'm in a silly mood. Tonight, we are discussing Bernie Sanders, Aipac. Yes, Aipac is actually giving Bernie Sanders a shout out. We're going to get into that story and the interview that he had on Face the Nation. I'm also going to discuss, believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, Alex Jones returns. Dun, dun, dun. We're getting into that. I'm also going to discuss Bill Ackman. That's him there. Yes, we are talking about him again tonight. Is busted. And what does this have to do with Jeffrey Epstein? Ladies and gentlemen, we're unleashing all the tea tonight. We're also going to discuss Joe Biden is losing to Donald Trump in swing states. They are sending out a red alarm here. And we're also going to discuss Tucker Carlson's recent announcement. What is he launching and why should you know about it? All of those stories tonight on the Sabby Sabs show. So I want to get started with the very first story. If you have not heard the news, it appears that Elon Musk has decided to reinstate Alex Jones' Twitter account. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, he is back. He is back. And he made a video giving a shout out to Elon Musk. We're going to get into that video. And I also want to hear what you think about this in reference to free speech. Some people are happy that Alex Jones is back on Twitter. Some people are not. They think it's a dangerous idea. We'll get into that as well when you hear what Piers Morgan had to say about Elon Musk bringing Alex Jones back on Twitter. But first, you'll get to hear from the man himself. Here is Alex Jones letting you know that he's back.
Less than a day after being reinstated to X, I was on Mario Naval's #1 X Spaces program. It had over 120,000 people watching at one time. More than 8 million watched it by the time it was over. Elon Musk came on for more than 2 hours, and I asked a lot of good questions. So officially, I was the guy getting interviewed, but I turned it around, made it about Elon Musk, because quite frankly, he's even more interesting than I am. We're going to be posting this interview with just my questions, cut down the full interviews, obviously on Mario's channel. We'll be posting it to X here in the next few hours. We'll be playing it on my radio show and TV show tomorrow, 11 a.m. Central, Infowars.com/show. So for all the people that heard about Infowars, but didn't know what we really stood for because it was misrepresented, this is your chance to go to Infowars.com/show, ban.video, or at Real Alex Jones back on Twitter, and actually see what I say, see what I stand for, and see it in context. At Real Alex Jones, please follow us there. You can also find us where we've still been on air 5 years after we were deplatformed at Infowars.com/show, ban.video, and newswars.com. But this is just.
Now, I want to say something really quickly here and we'll finish this video. I'm all for free speech. So, I mean, for me, I don't really, there's no skin off my back if Alex Jones is back on Twitter. But some people are really upset and they are showing it. They are really showing it. But I think what's important that we have to understand is that remember who was banned first. It was Alex Jones in reference to independent media. So actually, they started banning commentators on the right first. And then there were some people who actually cheerleaded that. They were happy that these accounts were being shut down. But then it made its way to the left. And then they started to suppress and also demonetize and ban left shows as well. So censorship knows no party. Censorship knows no political ideology. You know, if you're saying things that they feel does not fit the narrative, whether I agree with it or not, they can remove you. And that's a very, scary feeling, but it can happen to anyone.
Story. It's way bigger than Alex Jones. This is about Renaissance 2.0. It's about free speech winning. It's about the deep state failing. This is beyond cool. And again, Elon Musk talks about everything, including subjects he's never been asked about before in this interview. So I'll be on my regular show. I'll be breaking it down weekdays, 11 a.m. Central, but you want to hear the Alex Jones, Elon Musk interview at ban.video, Infowars.com, and at Real Alex Jones on Twitter. I want to salute the crew. I want to salute our supporters. I want to salute the folks that have kept us on air. Tucker Carlson for interviewing me last week that took us over the top, and I want to salute Elon Musk. Freedom of speech is paramount to a free human society. We're pro-human. We're on Team Human, as Elon Musk said. And the t-shirt's coming soon. Team Human, Infowars.com. I'll see you on the front lines of the fight for our future.
Okay, so here's my thing on this. I know a lot of people are, giving Elon Musk credit for reinstating his account. But while you're at it, Elon Musk, I would really like for you to bring back Garland Nixon on Twitter. So for those who are not aware, Garland Nixon, his account is it's published on Twitter, but they have permanently locked Garland Nixon out of that account. That's why you're not seeing any tweets from him. So I think the thing is I've noticed that Elon Musk, I think he is trying to, bring back some of those voices on the right and elevate some of those voices on the right as well, to be honest. But that's not happening on the left. When we get into this Twitter space discussion as well, another thing that you'll notice, these Twitter spaces that are hosted by Mario, and Mario follows me. If you notice, there's never left voices that are hosting these spaces or co-hosting these spaces. And I don't mean like someone like myself, but I'm talking about the bigger left voices, right? So like, I don't see Brianna Joy Gray co-hosting any of these Twitter spaces. I don't see any of these bigger names on the left being invited to co-host these spaces. And trust me, they're not being invited. I already know. We've had this conversation. They're not being invited. So it would be really great to see them apply that to the left as well, and not just people on the right. If we're going to talk about censorship, we got to include everybody, not just those voices that were suppressed or removed on the right. Now, Mario actually tweeted this in reference to Alex Jones. He said, Alex Jones and General Flynn discussed talking to liberal intellectually. So we're going to get into this conversation here. So this is Mario, Alex Jones, and General Flynn in this Twitter space. And you may recognize some of these faces here. This gentleman here down towards the bottom, who's next to Dave Smith, he actually posts a lot of Gaza content. So a lot of those videos that you see going viral on Twitter, about Gaza, that's actually coming from him. So he was in the space. Jackson Hinkle was there. Of course, Elon Musk, of course, Mario, and of course, Alex Jones. So let's get into this discussion here.
True.
I don't know how you do
we're
it, Alex.
109,000 right now, 109,000.
Yeah, I don't know how you do it, but I know that that we have to do it. We don't have I think we are in a place where we don't have a choice right now. I think the intellectual arguments on their side, I just think that they're going to fall flat, and they don't really have a good argument. And Elon mentioned it early on about, how much energy it takes to lie. I mean, it just does, to lie to so many damn people. But we have to pick this fight. It has to be intellectual. Our intellectual arguments are much, much stronger. And I just think we have to have the right type of people. And, those people have been on here today, and invite these people. I mean, if they don't want to come, we call them out as cowards. I mean,
wait a minute.
Why not?
Okay, they're talking about liberals, just FYI.
And everybody, wait a minute, General Flynn, hold on a minute. I'm going to call you out right now. Eating bugs, drag queen story time, open borders, World War III. You're saying that's not how you're saying their plan isn't wonderful?
Hey, for a guy that has had to eat bugs, Alex, they don't taste very good. So, yeah.
So look who was in this space. It said live Alex Jones, Musk, Tate, Gates, Vivek, Kalakanis, PBDC. These are all people that are on the right. And again, like, I'm pro free speech, but I would like to see Mario invite some left voices into some of these Twitter spaces that he hosts. And he has not been. It's something that a lot of us on the left have talked about. So again, they were basically talking about liberals, so to speak. So it said, Flynn said, I think the intellectual arguments on their side, I just think that they're going to fall flat and they don't really have a good argument. We have to pick this fight. It has to be intellectual. Our intellectual arguments are much, much stronger. I just think we have to have the right type of people. And those people have been on here today and invited these people. So that's what they were talking about. They're talking about someone like the woke language and things like that. But again, I would like to see left voices in that space. Now, as much as I've said that some people are happy that Alex Jones is back, some people are not. And that includes, of course, Piers Morgan. He actually does not agree with Elon Musk's decision to bring him back to Twitter. And he actually goes on to say that he believes that this is actually dangerous. Listen to this.
I'm a passionate defender of free speech. There's a massive clue in the name of this show, uncensored. And I believe in it. I believe that all honestly held opinions, however offensive they are, belong in the open, where they can be challenged, debated, and exposed. But there are limits on free speech. There are laws, and there is a line. I've always said that Alex Jones is a perfect example of where that line got crossed. He's a conspiracy theorist and shock jock in America who made hundreds of millions of dollars by peddling outrageous lies that the Sandy Hook school massacre shooting was a hoax. For the uninitiated, this is him shouting at me a week after that massacre on CNN.
Let me pause there for a second. So I do not agree with those statements that came from Alex Jones about the Sandy Hook school shooting. I do not agree with that. But I also don't think that people should be silenced, because the thing is, this just becomes a dangerous, like, slippery slope. Like I said, they came after him first, then they started to come after other voices. Remember, Twitter also had banned, like, Donald Trump. I don't agree with everything, most of the things I think politically that Donald Trump says. But again, then they in turn came after voices on the left. Let's go back and remember, what was it, about 2 years ago, where Hardlin's Media was censored on YouTube? They came after them, of all people. They came after Hardlin's Media. They also came after Jamal Thomas, who hosts the Progressive Soapbox. Jamal Thomas, of all people. Like, these are not people that have dangerous rhetoric. So they in turn started to come after left voices. They came after MCSC Network, the Convo Couch, etc. So it does spread. So that's the thing about censorship. We're just going to fast forward through this part, because I know YouTube is not going to like that rhetoric there about Sandy Hook. Let me come in here.
Because the only response in America to the Sandy Hook massacre was to do nothing. In fact, they continue to sell a lot more guns. 1 million new guns get sold in America every month. And there are already over 400 million in circulation. So if you're wondering, if you're curious why there are so many more mass shootings in America than there used to be, that's why. And if you're wondering what's going to happen in the next few years as 1 million new guns enter circulation and nothing gets done to stop mass shootings, my guess is there'll be a lot more mass shootings. I've covered a lot of them, especially when I was at CNN in America. Very few of them, in fact, none of them actually, were as soul-crushing as Sandy Hook. 20 children, aged between 6 and 7, were murdered by a mass killer with a semi-automatic AR-15 rifle. Alex Jones's reaction to this absolute appalling atrocity was to tell his followers on his InfoWars show it was all a government hoax set up by the Obama administration, a deep state plot to justify new gun laws that would take away their guns.
Yeah, he was wrong about that. But to be fair, he has apologized for that, just FYI.
He said the grieving families were all crisis actors.
Sandy Hook, it's got inside job.
Let me go ahead and skip over this. Sorry. I just know YouTube is not going to like that. There we go.
Well, as a direct result of his lies, those grieving families were harassed and threatened with death by his followers. Erica Lafferty, daughter of the murder principal, Dawn Hochsprung, got death and rape threats from people who said her mother was fictional. Robbie Parker, who lost his daughter Emily, was chased down the street by a Jones supporter asking him how much he'd earned by lying about the death of his daughter. Mark Barden, father of 7-year-old victim Daniel Barden, says that one of Jones's followers urinated on his dead son's grave. Some of these families have successfully sued him now for defamation, which is explicitly not protected by America's First Amendment. Jones was ordered to pay record damages, more than $1 billion in total. He's yet, of course, to pay a penny. He actually declared himself bankrupt to avoid doing so. Nevertheless, Elon Musk has inexplicably decided it's time to restore Alex Jones to X, formerly Twitter.
So some of the parents did sue him. So it took place in court, which is actually where it should have been. But I feel like other than that, you have to be careful about removing people from platforms. Look at all the people that have been removed. We know Jackson Hinkle was removed. Again, I don't agree with everything Jackson Hinkle says politically, but I've also said again, still, you have to be careful because people still should have that right of free speech. And I'm going to show you in just a bit what it actually says in the Constitution about free speech.
I'm a big supporter generally of Elon Musk. I think the work he's doing to eradicate bias and protect free speech in the place where so many debates now originate is an important, very important one. But this was a profoundly disappointing and wrong decision. I'd like to remind Elon what he said about reinstating Alex Jones when he first took over. He said this. He said he wouldn't restore him and said, "My firstborn child died in my arms. I felt his last heartbeat. I have no mercy for anyone who would use the deaths of children for gain, politics, or fame."
But Elon Musk has been known to change his mind. And we all know this. Like, he may say one thing today and then tomorrow he'll change his mind. He did actually submit a poll on Twitter asking people if he should reinstate Alex Jones. He's kind of been known to do that. He did the same thing with Donald Trump, and he brought Donald Trump's account back, although I don't think Trump has been tweeting because Trump has Truth Social. But he has been known to do that. So I will say he did ask the viewers, he asked, Twitter followers if they thought he should bring him back. So just FYI.
Well, that is precisely what Alex Jones did. He literally used dead children for gain, fame, and politics. So what's changed in a year, Elon? Well, there's now a big movement to rehabilitate Alex Jones online. Many argue he's right more often than he's wrong, when all the evidence points to the complete opposite. And in the case of Sandy Hook, it wasn't just one little mistake that he owned up to. Andrew Tate tweeted, Alex Jones is an effing hero. Really? He's not my kind of hero. He's the opposite of a hero. This is a man who repeatedly and deliberately lied about the mass shooting of children at school to enrich himself. He called it all as phony as a $3 bill, and yet that's what he is. Yes, he's now apologized, but he did that under legal duress because his business was about to go to the wall. This wasn't.
So I guess the question is, are we going to hold this against Alex Jones for the rest of his life? I think that's the question that I have. Like, yeah, he did apologize. Yes, he did go to court, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if I would call him a hero, but I think this is part of the problem. I think people spend too much time looking for heroes. If you're looking for a hero, just look in the mirror. You can be your own hero, right? But you should never look up to all these other people, pundits, commentators, et cetera. You should never look up to any of these people and celebrities as well as your hero. And I think that's a big part of the problem. I think a lot of people, particularly in this country, they're still looking for a hero.
Something he blurted out once and instantly regretted. He did this for years. And every time he lied about Sandy Hook, he made more money. Night after night, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. And he knew what was going on to these families as a result of his harassment on air. To see him back on X selling his book, his merchandise, his website, his info wars, frankly, makes me want to puke. Every opinion should be heard, but inciting harassment and violence to profit from unspeakable grief, to pour into the wounds of those families yet more misery and pain. That's not free speech. It's deliberate hate speech, and it's disgusting.
So Piers Morgan is not happy about Alex Jones coming back. Russell Brand actually had something to say about this as well. He said Elon says he would go to prison for free speech, and Alex Jones is back. So this is actually Russell Brand. He recorded part of this Twitter space. Listen to this part.
With that,
we all know what that is now, don't we? Pause it. Twitter Spaces, it's taken over everything. You've got to watch it on the show. We're talking about that. Would Elon Musk go to prison for his use? He says he's willing to. Alex Jones offered another take on Sandy Hook. We're also talking about extremism elsewhere. Are the escalating demands for continuing the conflict in Ukraine extreme? Is some of Jacinda, I don't remember her surname, Ireland, excuse me, is some of her rhetoric around free speech extreme, particularly when she overtly proposed a two-tier society at the height of the pandemic? Is it extreme the way that legacy media rhetoric always describes Trump as a dictator? So we're talking about extremism and media. We're talking about independent media spaces and legacy media spaces. We're going to have a conversation just with a few less contributors. Musk, Tate. There's so many people on there, although I think they've all been on the show at some point. See you at these times. In the meantime, stay free. Remember.
So that's Russell Brand there asking about, well, what actually is free speech and what can you discuss? Now, I want to show you something here, and this is from Jeffrey Denton. I'm not sure if you've seen this before, but he posted this in reference to free speech. He said, Congress shall make no law respecting answer establishment of religion. Let's see what it says in the Constitution with the First Amendment. It says the First Amendment, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the right of the people peacefully to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So this is straight from the First Amendment. So I saw this on Twitter and I was like, I have to show this to people. Do you see this, guys? Congress shall make no law in reference to free speech. So when you see these hearings that are happening in Congress about censorship from Matt Taibbi and Michael Schellenberger, also RFK spoke to them in reference to free speech, Congress really has no authority here. This is straight from the First Amendment. Share this with your friends. I don't think everyone has actually read this. It goes on to show House passes resolution condemning anti-Semitism. Remember this? Remember we talked about how they passed that resolution, right? Basically equating Zionism with anti-Semitism. So if you're anti-Zionist, now they're trying to say that you're anti-Semitic. Congress is not supposed to do this according to the First Amendment. And everyone should push back on this. Look, we didn't write the First Amendment. This was already written. This is incredibly dangerous. Where are we going? What are we doing? What's happening here? Everyone, when you have the opportunity, you should call your representative. Their numbers are public. Call your representative in Congress and tell them about what the First Amendment says. I don't understand how this was even able to pass. No law in reference to free speech. Should this be taken to the Supreme Court? And the reason why it says this in the First Amendment is because it is incredibly dangerous. Because now the government is having oversight over what you can say. Even the piece here about free press. Look at what's happening to Julian Assange. Why do you think they don't want to call him what he was, which was a publisher? Why do you think they refer to him as a hacker? That's what I want you to think about. And I'm showing you this because don't be surprised if they make another move pressuring Elon Musk and telling Elon Musk he has to remove certain people from that platform. Don't be surprised. So you don't have to like Alex Jones. You don't have to like any of these people. Piers Morgan, Andrew Tate, any of these people. But you also don't have to listen to them. You don't have to read what they write. And you don't have to watch them. That's the beauty of it all. Let me go to some of the comments here in the chat. Bella says, had dinner with Alex. He seemed like a sincere guy. You had dinner with Alex Jones? That is random. Wow. Clay says, I didn't know Garland Nixon was still banned on Twitter. Eric, can you go to Twitter and search for Garland Nixon's account? Elon should reinstate his account if he believes in free speech. Yes, this is what I was saying. Like, okay, you brought back Alex Jones, but Garland Nixon is still, Thank you for the super chat, David. What's one question you'd want to ask Alex Sabby? I don't know. I actually haven't thought about it. To be honest. Thank you for the super chat, Sparky. I thought it was only a few offhanded, speculative comments Alex made about that issue, and a mountain was made of a molehill. Were people paid to harass parents to bring Jones down? I don't know. That's something we'd probably never know, to be honest with you. I don't know. But again, I mean, are we going to hold this against him forever? I don't know. Do you have the Garland Nixon account on Twitter, Eric? Because I'm curious. I want to see. I know last time I checked it, it was still there, but he's still logged out. Marvin says, you're right, Sabby, but Congress is owned, so they work for the money, and the money is supplied by the Zionists. Yes, this is incredibly true. This is a hot mess. Okay, thank you so much. So here is Garland Nixon's account. Like I said, it's still there, but let's see. When was the last time? Okay, you see this, right? He has a pinned tweet from February 24th. But the last tweet that you see from Garland Nixon was a repost. That was August 21st. Let's go down further. August 21st. Yeah, August 21st. So this just goes to show you again, and Garland Nixon was an avid tweeter. So do we all believe that Garland Nixon has just been chilling all this time? No, I've talked to Garland Nixon. Garland Nixon is still locked out of his account. So Elon Musk reinstate Garland Nixon, let him have access to his account. This is crazy. This is wild. And you don't have to submit a poll for that. Just let him have access to his account again. Garland Nixon hosts a radio show. Like, he used to be on Fox News. So bring him back as well. All right, we are going to go on to the next story here. We're going to dive into Bernie Sanders. So Bernie Sanders has been receiving a lot of blowback from people recently because of this interview that he just had with Face the Nation about Israel and Gaza. Bernie Sanders for quite some time has been trying to walk in the middle of the road in reference to this issue. He still won't say the word ceasefire, which is very telling within itself. He's still calling out, obviously, he's calling out Hamas for what they did. But at the same time, he's saying that the Palestinian people need help and they need humanitarian aid, etc. He also recently said that money given to Israel should be conditional, right? So he said that as well. But Bernie Sanders is still not willing to call for a ceasefire. So after this interview, the few Bernie supporters that are still left out there attacked him heavily on Twitter. And it's really interesting to me that they're just now realizing who Bernie Sanders really is. The thing is this is who Bernie Sanders was all along. He was just able to pull the wool over our eyes. I showed you the video from 2014 when he yelled at one of his own constituents that tried to tell him about what was happening to the Palestinian people, and Bernie Sanders told him to sit down and shut up. What you see from Bernie right now, this is who Bernie Sanders always was, at least going back to when he was running for president. He just pulled the wool over our eyes. This is the interview that made those Bernie supporters that still exist quite angry. Let's get into it.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that he sees a gap between Israel's stated intent of limiting civilian casualties and reality. And the Secretary of Defense said they could face a strategic defeat given civilian casualties. Is this vocal enough criticism from the administration in your point of view?
Well, it's a start. I think both Blinken and Austin are right. What the president is trying to do is trying to make clear to Netanyahu and his right-wing extremist government is, yes, you can go to war against Hamas, but you cannot go to war against the Palestinian people and cause the horrific damage to human life that we are seeing right now. Margaret, there have been 16,000 people killed so far.
Let me pause there for a second. So this is the easy thing to do. It is easy to call out Netanyahu because he's right wing. So that's something that's easy for Bernie to do. That's easy for other Democrat politicians to do, right? Got it. But the difficult part to do is to acknowledge that the Palestinian people have been under occupation, that they've been struggling, they've been suffering before Netanyahu even came into power. The difficult thing to do is to talk about what the state of Israel has done to the Palestinian people for decades. What is the more difficult thing to do is to call for a ceasefire. Now, Miko Palid, I saw him recently talk at MIT. Check out that video if you haven't had a chance to see it. That posted earlier today. You know what Miko said? He said, calling for a ceasefire is actually the weak spot. That's one of the weakest things that you can do. He said, that's minimal. We should be calling for so much more. So if Bernie Sanders can't even do the minimal task of calling for a ceasefire, do we all sit here and actually believe that if Bernie Sanders had won the presidency, he would have actually fought for those things he said he was going to fight for? He can't even do the bare minimum in reference to this conflict.
Palestinians, 2/3 of whom are women and children. You're talking about 1.9 million people displaced, going around without any water, food. without any medical supplies. It is a humanitarian disaster, and the United States has got to put all of the pressure that it can to tell Netanyahu to stop this disastrous military approach.
And just to be clear, Israel says it's killed 7,000 militants. They haven't explained how many civilians they estimate they've killed. The U.S. says they can't tally it. The number you cited there is from the Gaza Ministry of Health.
Pause. Notice what she just did there. When it came to the Israeli casualties, what the Israeli media is saying in reference to the casualties in Gaza, she just believes it. You can take their word, right? But when it comes to the Palestinian deaths, notice that she says that is actually coming from the Gaza ministry, as if you're not supposed to believe their word. And Bernie Sanders should have pushed back on that. That's what she's telling you. And other people are saying this too. By the way, that is a pro-Israel state talking point. I just watched the woman earlier today. We're going to cover it on Friday. The woman that had the debate earlier today on Rising with Brianna Joy Gray, she did the same thing. They all have that same talking point because what they're trying to get across to people is that they don't want you to trust what the Palestinian people are saying. But when it comes to what's coming from the state of Israel, you are supposed to trust it and not question it. This is a problem. Got to push back on that. Didn't do it.
But the bottom line here is I know you have been very clear to your colleagues the U.S. should not provide more aid to Israel, to the Netanyahu government, with no strings attached, you wrote, because it would make the U.S. complicit. You said, quote, in an all-out war against innocent men, women, and children who have nothing to do with Hamas. What do you believe the Netanyahu government's intent is here?
Hard to say. It really is hard to say. It may be that they're responding in rage against the horrific and terrible Hamas attack that killed 1,200 innocent Israelis. Maybe in some of the right-wing extremist minds, there is the goal to drive the Palestinian people off of Gaza completely. They have now destroyed about half of the housing units in Gaza, so it's hard to predict. But I think when General Austin said, you can win the battle but lose the war, Israel is losing the war in terms of how the world is looking at this situation.
And not just in reference to how the world is looking at the situation, but also in reference to the fact that they have not rooted out Hamas. How are you winning a war and you haven't taken out the enemy, who they call the enemy, right? So if they consider them to be the enemy and you haven't captured them, you haven't rooted them out, how are you winning? So it's not just in reference to the way the world is looking. Look at the expression on Bernie's face. It's not this just in reference to the way the world sees it. It's also in reference to the actual strategy at hand, which is not working apparently. Look at his face.
I think that it would be irresponsible for the United States to give Netanyahu another $10 billion to continue to wage this awful war.
So progressives like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Rashida Tlaib have been clear in calling for a ceasefire. You've taken some flack because you have not. The United States government is opposing a ceasefire as well, and they're isolated at the UN on that point. Why is it you oppose a ceasefire?
Let me pause here for a second. Notice he can say that the U.S. government shouldn't give funding to Israel to continue this war, but he won't call for a ceasefire. Make that make sense, guys. You can sit up here, you can say, Bernie, that the U.S. government should no longer give funding to Israel to continue this war, but you can't call for a ceasefire. Walking in both sides. See, he's trying to do the both sides thing here.
Well, first of all, I strongly support and wish and hope that the United States will support the United Nations resolution that was vetoed, that we vetoed the other day. That was a humanitarian pause, a humanitarian ceasefire that would have, by the way, called for the release of all of the hostages held by Hamas and would have allowed the UN and other agencies to begin to supply the enormous amount of humanitarian aid that the Palestinian people. In terms of a permanent ceasefire, I don't know how you can have a permanent ceasefire with Hamas, who has said before October 7th and after October 7th that they want to destroy Israel. They want a permanent war. I don't know how you have a permanent ceasefire with an attitude like that.
Let's come in and let me see where we got him. Okay. So he brought up the resolution that was presented at the UN in the United States. He's right about that. They're the only country that vetoed it. The United Kingdom voted actually to abstain, which whatever. But the other countries voted in support of the ceasefire. Then he goes on to tell you that he does not support a permanent ceasefire because Hamas says that they want to remove Israel, etc. Here's the problem. The resolution that was presented at the UN was a call for a permanent ceasefire. I talked about that on this show with Lee Camp. It wasn't just to pause and give humanitarian aid. There was already a pause. We already had a ceasefire that was a temporary ceasefire. See where we got him? Now, here's something else that he leaves out. When it comes to the permanent ceasefire, he puts the blame all on Hamas and says that Hamas wants to get rid of Israel. He conveniently leaves out that Netanyahu himself presented before October 7th what he wanted as a greater Israel, which showed that Palestine was gone on the map. On the map. Won't even mention that. Which also means that the state of Israel wants the Palestinian people gone. And for Bernie Sanders to sit there, and he's supposed to be a leftist, so to speak, and to leave that out of the conversation. How can you be a leftist and you don't even support BDS, for God's sakes? How can you? How can you? How can you be a leftist and you get this issue wrong? Even the DSA, even the Democratic Socialists of America get this issue. I don't know who spoke to Bernie. I don't know who has threatened Bernie Sanders. But at this point in time, I think it is best for Bernie Sanders to retire and leave the Senate. At this point in time, you're not doing us any good. Any good. You're still trying to maintain your relationship with your establishment Democrat buds. And that's what this is really all about. Bernie Sanders does not want to be left out of those political circles. What a joke. We honestly believe that if he became president, he was going to take on Big Pharma. He was going to take on the billionaires. He can't even call for a fucking ceasefire.
Okay, so the war you're saying against Hamas is justified in that way.
I think Israel has the right to defend itself and to go after Hamas, not the Palestinian people.
Okay. Would you vote against a version of the supplemental bill that President Biden is asking Congress for if it lacked the conditions on Israel aid you're calling for? Because there's other things that may be attached to, like Ukraine aid.
I voted against the motion to proceed on that bill. It's a different bill. I strongly support aid for Ukraine to stand up to Putin's aggression. But I think what the Congress has got to do is make it clear to Netanyahu that we're not going to simply give him a blank check to kill women and children in Palestine.
This is exactly why we need single subject bills. Matt Gaetz was right about this. This is exactly why. This is done on purpose, folks. Of course, they would couple Ukraine with Israel and Gaza in the same bill in reference to funding? Of course. Because even some of the same politicians that don't want to support this war in Israel have no problem supporting the funding for Ukraine, like Bernie Sanders. Make it make sense. I'm so sick and tired of hearing this, by the way. The number of people who continue to say, well, we got to Chuck Schumer, we got to get at him, we got to stop Russia because Putin's going to walk right into the rest of Europe. Really? Have you heard Russia make this statement? Has anybody heard them say this? I've never heard them say this. Just another excuse for the United States government to aid war. Let's continue.
Okay. White House officials say privately they don't think that the blowback from this war will impact them negatively with Democratic voters by the time we get to the presidential election. Do you think they're miscalculating?
I think this war has been, I don't know the answer to that, but I think the war clearly has been very harmful, not just among progressives, not just among Democrats. The American people were outraged by the Hamas attack against Israel, rightfully so. But they are equally outraged now by what Israel is doing. So you're seeing all over this country, people saying, why are we giving money to an Israeli government that is doing such awful things? Will it hurt politically? It might. At the end of the day, I think, Biden is going to win this election, but what's going on now is not helpful.
I wouldn't be too sure of that, Bernie, especially when we get into this story about Joe Biden losing these swing states. I would not be so sure to assume that Joe Biden is going to win this election. Another thing I want to add too, I don't think people are equally angry. I think the American people, based on the polls, are more angry at all these kids that are dying in Gaza. They're more angry at that. By the way, they're saying the number is 16,000 people now. Just remember, as with any war, that's not the final number. And the number is more likely to be higher. As time goes on, more bodies will be discovered. So that number is actually higher than what they say it is. So I don't think so, Bernie. I think the American people are actually more angry at Israel killing children.
I want to ask you about hate in this country and concerns around it. As you know, strong concern about anti-Semitism right now. Congresswoman Elise Stefanik had a really pointed question and answer with university presidents this week. One of those presidents has since resigned as a result of the fallout. I wonder your thoughts of how far free speech should be protected when it is calling for genocide.
So here we go. Once again, that is not what the students are calling for. Notice she talks about the hate speech and she talks about the rhetoric and she talks about it, but she only talks about it in reference to one particular group. She's only talking about protecting Jewish people. She's not talking about protecting Palestinian people in this country. Now, Bernie Sanders sits here. He's from Burlington, Vermont. 3 Palestinian college students were shot in Burlington, Vermont. So how can you only be concerned about protecting one group, but not the other group? Listen to this.
Well, I agree. Look, we believe strongly in free speech, and academia is an area where you're going to hear a lot of debate about issues that may make us uncomfortable. But at the end of the day, when somebody is saying they believe in genocide for the Jewish people or racist attacks against Black Americans, or et cetera, that is not acceptable. I think on a college campus where all of the students, Black, Jewish, whatever, Islamic, have got to feel comfortable on campus.
Notice what I just told you about what happened to those Palestinian kids in Burlington, Vermont. Bernie Sanders doesn't even mention them. Doesn't even mention it. Perfect opportunity when she talks about protecting certain groups of people. He doesn't even mention what happened to those kids in Burlington, Vermont. Oh, and by the way, don't throw us in this, Bernie. You see what he tried to do there? black people and da da da. No. Don't throw us in this. Don't try to. No. Because you didn't even care about us enough to support reparations for African American descendants of slavery in this country when you were running your campaign. So don't bring us into this, Bernie. Don't try to add black people into it to make yourself feel better.
Well, okay, Senator, we're going to have to leave it there because we are running out of time. But thank you
Thank you very much.
weighing in today.
Just another establishment shill. Just because you took grassroots donation doesn't mean you're not still working for the establishment. And to prove that point, here is Aipac giving a shout out to Bernie Sanders for this interview. You see what's happening? Here it is, Aipac. Thank you, Senator Sanders, for your strong opposition to a permanent ceasefire with Hamas. You see this? Aipac giving a shout out to Bernie Sanders. Don't come to me and talk to me about any type of Bernie Sanders movement. That movement left when Bernie Sanders suspended his campaign and forgot about the people who supported him. There is no Bernie movement. There is no progressive movement. What you have are people who called themselves progressives that have basically caved to the establishment, something they never said that they would do. If I were Bernie Sanders, I would be embarrassed and ashamed to get a shout out from Aipac if I'm supposed to be a leftist. Even if you look at some of the comments, there's Notori. They are all paid off. How is this not illegal? That's Bernie Sanders doing the work for Aipac. He said, Dalton says, but Israel is a racist ethno state built on stolen land. I'm an American. I've been taught to hate that when white people do it. What's different with Israel? 2.4K likes. Wild Survival says, y'all still feeling the burn? I'm Senator Bernie Sanders. I'm a Zionist pig. See that? I sincerely hope no one is still feeling the burn at this point. And he actually had the audacity to consider running for president again. What a joke. What a joke. If you have not had a chance to do so, go ahead and smash that like button, guys. Thank you so much. That helps me out with the algorithm. I'm going to go to these comments first, and then we'll go ahead to the next story. Thank you for the super chat, Andrew. Pierce is still salty when Alex embarrassed him the first time. Yeah, I think so too. Thank you, P. Smith. Over a decade ago, Alex talked about Epstein's Island, plastics lowering fertility, NAFTA being the demise of the USA, and more. That's interesting because people mainly only remember him for the school shooting. Thank you for the super chat, Sparky. Establishment makes out like Jones went after Sandy Hook parents relentlessly. In his vast amount of broadcasting about many subjects, he spent relatively little time on that issue. That's interesting. Thank you, Frank. Piers Morgan is from Great Britain. Elon is from South Africa. Roll eyes. Why are they telling us what free speech is? Ouch. That might be the comment of the night. Eric, can we keep this one? Can we keep this one starred? I'll shout out the comment of the night later. Thank you, David. Bernie equals Pontius Pilate, wanting to wipe his hands of this mess, stop funding, but continue the genocide. Zero spine, no balls, just a talking head. Thank you, Cool Blue. You're right. Bernie Sanders should retire. Thank you, Sparky. Make Israel Syria again. In those Ottoman Empire days, Jews and Arabs got along fine. That's right. That is correct. Thank you so much for the tip on Rockfin, JVB, just for starters. Thank you so much. So, you know what they say, right? If you can't beat them, join them. But I've also said that sometimes you don't have to join them. Sometimes you can start your own thing. And that is exactly what Tucker Carlson has decided to do. So Tucker Carlson made a huge announcement on Megyn Kelly's show about his next steps in reference to, trying to fight back against the censorship industrial complex and supporting media voices that are often suppressed or not allowed on mainstream networks. Tucker Carlson has decided to launch his own network, not even just his own network, but his own freaking platform. I'm going to show you what it looks like in just a second. Now, politically, I don't agree with Tucker Carlson on a lot of things. I do agree with him in reference to free speech and the censorship issue. So this will be very telling. This will be very interesting to see what happens here, because you have Rumble, you have Rockfin. Although I know some people have told me that they don't like the app for Rumble and Rockfin. I've heard people say that. I guess I kind of get it, because if you're comparing it to YouTube, it's not quite the same. But Tucker Carlson has decided to do something, what I think is actually a better idea, by having his own platform. Let's go ahead and get started with this discussion here.
So that leads me to the big announcement today. So tell us what you're doing. The headline that we got from your team is you're launching a streaming service. And then I will be honest, I was like, what is a streaming service? Like, is that like Hulu when I go to my TV, or Apple or Netflix? Or explain what it means and describe the scope of it.
I'm about to make a river joke. It has nothing to do with streams. And as a trout fisherman, that makes me sad. No, it's simply bringing programming to you by subscription digitally. Okay. And we're going to be doing that for two reasons. One, X, which has just been an amazing venue for us and will continue to be our venue. And Elon Musk, really great to us. It's not set up for these videos, for example. If you put out a lot of content and we plan, that's exactly, or for subscriptions. I think it will be. I mean, there's a subscription function on X, and I think they're fine tuning it, and I think we're going to participate in that at some point, et cetera, et cetera. But just the way that it's structured, the nature of the app doesn't lend itself to like putting a big library right in front of you on one page. And we want to do that because we have a lot of stuff. And so it's a subscription model, just like any other streaming service or one of these companies with at the end. And the point is really simple. It's twofold. One, you want to bring a lot of material. I hate the word content. I'm trying to think of an option. A lot of material, a lot of news, a lot of facts, a lot of thoughtful opinions to people. You want a library, okay? We had a huge library where we worked before. We lost the whole thing. So we want to rebuild that. And second, you need some scale. I'm not a money person, as you said correctly. I probably should be a little more, but we live pretty simply, actually. So we don't. But anyway, but you need to have a lot of people work for you if you want to gather the information. There are just too many things going on, and so in order to have, a staff capable of bringing a lot of information about what's happening right now, particularly in the next 12 months, which will reshape the world, in my view. You need to pay them, and you need to have a real company. And the downside is, of course, once you have a real company, then the stakes rise. If you're a lone person, whatever, you're more cat-like. You're like the Viet Cong. You can march 20 miles and sleep in a tree. But if you're a company, you're more a fixed position and a fixed target. So there is a downside to it. But we felt that we needed to do it because there's just a lot going on. So it's a subscription service.
So let me pause here for just a second. So basically what he's trying to do is what some other creators have chosen to do, and that is rely on subscriptions. So they're not relying on ad revenue. So for example, Breaking Points also has the option for you to actually subscribe off of YouTube. So you're like a subscription member, and then you get extra perks along with that, right? So more people have been moving towards that model just because the reality is here on YouTube, the way that it works in reference to ad revenue is your content considered safe for advertisers? And that's how YouTube views a lot of these videos. That's why, like, for some people, you may not see ads, some you will, some just aren't monetized, but sometimes you will, sometimes you won't. if they demonetize a video, then not for copyright, but it will say not safe for advertisers. That's really what it's all about. However, the subscription model idea is becoming more and more popular. So in order to actually watch the videos on this service that he has, I believe some of them are going to be free. But I think if you want the full product, like there may be an interview and maybe part of that interview may be free. But if you want the full interview, you're going to have to pay a monthly subscription to get that. Rockfin has this option as well, where some people can actually pay, I think it's $9.99 a month, and they get access to a lot of the premium content on Rockfin, everyone's premium content on Rockfin as well. So this is becoming more popular. And again, this has to do with the censorship issue. We got to remember why he was removed from Fox in the first place. They didn't like some of the things that Tucker Carlson was talking about in reference to Ukraine. And I would also say, because he talked about what happened to the Uhuru movement, those activists that were arrested by the DOJ, I think that was another thing that sent off red alarms. So.
Okay. So, and to get it, people need to go to tuckercarlson.com right now. And as I understand it, they can sign up and they can have this subscription relationship with you for $9 a month or $72 a year. Something like that. And in addition, they can still get all the free content on X and on an audio podcast that you're dropping.
Exactly. And the X stuff is not going away. And I've just been amazed by what a great platform it's been. And the main, I've noticed the scale of it. I'm sure coming from television, you see this too. It's like the number of people who watch is so dwarfs anything that's happening on linear television. It's like a different world. I know, it's amazing. But the thing that I really notice is how international it is. I mean, it truly is the world's last big free speech platform. I mean, it is that. And so there's something very appealing about that. We took 7 international trips this summer around the world. And I wanted to do that because I've been stuck in the studio for all these years and I hadn't done it in a long time, since the beginning of the War on Terror, actually. And it just confirmed my belief that everything is changing so fast, particularly America's role in the world. And so we've got, this winter, we're traveling around the world to a bunch of different places. We've got a bunch of different interviews and stories that we're doing in various countries. And that's a huge feature of it. And that, a lot of that will appear on X. But you also sort of wonder, I like long form. You now do it for a living and you know how satisfying it is to talk to someone for more than 8 minutes. You sort of wonder, like, there's got to be a place that's easier to view than, social media are right now. And so some of that will go on X. And then if you're interested in some other features and documentaries, we're doing a bunch of documentaries. All of that is in the subscription service.
So this platform of Tucker Carlson is also going to have documentaries. Now, I'll show you what it looks like in just a second, but I'm curious to see if he's going to allow left voices onto this platform as well. Like, I don't think I can see him saying like, no, you're leftist, you can't be on here. But I'm curious to see who is going to be a part of this platform. Right now, when I show it to you, the only thing you're going to see is Tucker Carlson on there. But that's because it just started, obviously. But imagine if that was like a space for voices of all different political ideologies, right? Like Truth Social is more so for conservatives. And everybody kind of has their space. But imagine if it was everybody. Like, imagine if you saw Tucker Carlson, you saw Rising on there. Imagine if you saw like Breaking Points on there. If you saw, even RBN, if you saw RBN on there, imagine what that could do. That you would have one space, just all political, all politics. People may not necessarily agree with everyone that's there, but it's one space that you can go to hear all these different views. Imagine that.
You know what this reminds me of, Tucker? I appeared at some media conference a year ago, and one of the main featured speakers was Mr. Beast. And Mr. Beast, he's incredibly successful. He's figured out the YouTube algorithm. Like, the head of YouTube was there talking about how he's spoken to this guy, Jimmy, and how he's not just some kid who got lucky on YouTube. Like, he figured out the algorithm and started programming to it, and just everything exploded. I think he's got 200 million subscribers now. But one of the ways in which he did it was he appeals to a worldwide audience. He's gone beyond the United States of America, and he produces content that could be interesting across cultures, across languages, and so on. And that's kind of what I see you doing. You're like becoming the Mr. Beast of news.
Mr. Beast, by the way, at the closest grocery store to me, as soon as you walk in the door, you see like this island of Mr. Beast snacks. It's the first thing you see as soon as you walk in the door. And I'm like, Mr. Beast sells snacks. But yeah, Mr. Beast actually did work very hard to figure out the YouTube algorithm, right? But why even have to do all that? Like, that's the thing. I think that's something that Tucker's saying. Why even have to just rely on this freaking, algorithm? Now, I'm sure he's not going to allow a lot of shows to be on that platform, because again, you'd run into that same issue with the algorithm, right? Like which shows are up at the top and which shows are at the bottom. But I think this is a different way to go.
Well, I would say, that's a huge compliment because he's been so in the medium. I would just say two things. He works with YouTube. Okay. So he's actually sort of part of their business in a way. I'm not attacking that, but that's a little bit different from what we're doing. And I would also say that he's very self-consciously, non-offensive. He's trying to appeal to his wife. He's Disney
and
trying
you're
to
the
sell
opposite.
a movie in China. So, well, a little bit. I mean, just by, not that I seek to offend people. I really don't. In fact, I think it's wrong to offend people for its own sake. I'm not giving the finger to old ladies at crosswalks. You know what I mean? I actually don't like to offend people.
No, but truth-telling in modern day America can be offensive.
Well, in the modern day world, I mean, what's happening in America looks very much like what's happening in half a dozen other countries I've been to in the last couple of months. I mean, it's the same template. The countries are becoming less democratic. They yelp about democracy constantly. Democracy, we're defending democracy, when in fact, they're creating permanent oligarchies with the help of technology. That's exactly what's happening. And again, not just here. The Anglosphere, they put people in concentration in Australia. They ended free speech in New Zealand and any right to self-defense. Like, these are countries that are becoming authoritarian. Canada killed, in the last few years, has killed over 40,000 of its own citizens through state-administered suicide. Like, there's all this amazing stuff.
Can anyone respond to that about Canada? I'm not sure about that. I don't know about that. But if anyone in the chat is Canadian, can you confirm that?
And so to push back against any of it immediately means you're going to be called, let me guess, a racist, and a bunch of other things too. And so it's kind of baked in the cake. Like, you're going to make people mad if you call them out on what they're doing. That's wrong. But that's kind of the whole point, is because we don't, and that really is the whole point of the subscriptions. It's like, I don't know how honest, I should probably be here, but Elon never offered me any money or anything, or to hire me or anything like that. But I love him. I think he's wonderful. But it never occurred to me to ask to work for him, because the whole point is not working for anybody. That's like the whole point. And we turned down a couple of opportunities, very generous, and I think they were meant in the best spirit. But just the nature of that arrangement is something that at this stage of my life, I just don't want. I want to wait.
So I didn't know this at first until I saw this interview, but it appears he did receive other offers, but he chose not to take them. That was interesting.
Wake up and say to myself, you can say whatever you want, within the bounds of what you think is true, your own conscience, whatever, but I'm going to make those calls, and I'm going to do it without interference, period. And I'm going to tell the unadorned truth, and I hope gently and, in as least offensive way as I possibly can. But I'm going to tell that truth until the day I die. And I really mean that. And I'm going to try to do it in my personal life too. It's one of my things that I've resolved to do until I die, because I think that's the answer. I really do.
This is the only.
So the question that I have, notice what he said, he's going to be the one making those calls, right? So the question that I have is, who is funding this? Did Tucker Carlson use his own money to fund this platform of his? He could have. I don't know. But I'm asking because in the past, when people have decided to launch their own platforms or their own, news website, it has not been uncommon for them to accept billionaire money in order to do so. Glenn Greenwald and I had this discussion the very first time I interviewed him. He actually mentioned that it was a mistake to get billionaire funding for The Intercept, because at the time he said he thought that was a good idea. He was like, we had to get the money, right? But then later on, he started to realize with that money from billionaires, there's some strings that are attached. And who did they try to silence? They tried to silence Glenn Greenwald, who came up with The Intercept, right? They didn't want him to publish the Hunter Biden laptop story. That's why he left The Intercept. So my question is, who is funding this? And if I were to ever have the opportunity to speak to Tucker Carlson, I don't think that I would, but if I ever had the opportunity to speak to him, I would ask him about that. Who's funding it, Tucker? Because if it's attached to billionaire money, are you really going to be able to have full free speech? Just curious.
Only way for you. This is the only way forward. And if you zoom out, and then we looked at 94 at Tucker Carlson's career, when we look back at 53, which I think you were when the Fox decision came down, it will be the best thing that ever happened to you. It'll be a great thing for America. So. You know, you look at the stats. We just had numbers out today. In fact, my team pulled these for me, and I thought they were very interesting on what cable's doing, what broadcast is doing right now. And I know that, it's a dying business, but the stats actually show it. Just not for nothing, but take a listen to this. The headline at The Verge is, it's official. People are not watching TV as much as they used to. Linear TV now accounts for less than 50% of all TV usage. So, you got a TV in your house, you turn it on, you have all sorts of options. You can turn on cable, you can turn on your broadcast television networks, ABC, NBC, CBS, or you can go to Apple, you can go to Hulu, you can go to Netflix, you can go to Amazon Prime, or you can go to YouTube. You have all different Rumble. You have different options there now. And those different options are now dominating the more than 50%. Cable and linear television entirely, never mind news, are dying. So you've left a dying animal, and you've gotten on top of this new exciting horse, and you're going to ride it off into the sunset all the way to your dying day, Tucker. And I think you're going to be an important voice, even more so than you were.
One thing I will say too about mainstream news, not only that it's dying. Yes, it is dying, but I don't believe their numbers are real. And I felt this way for quite some time. I don't believe their numbers. Let me tell you something I saw, right? There was a CNN stream right on YouTube, because those major networks also have channels on YouTube. Go figure, right? So I think it was CNN's Dash News or something like that. But they were live, and I saw they had like 200 people watching them live. Then all of a sudden, later on that same day, they apparently received like over 100,000 views when they had 200 people watching them live. Nah, bud. Hell, even I can tell you that. Nah. So I don't even believe those numbers. I think mainstream media has been inflating their numbers, and I think they've been doing that for quite some time. Now, this is what it looks like. So it's already published, and it's called TCN, Tucker Carlson Network. So Tucker named this after himself. He didn't Yes, look, you're going to be working for him, okay? Tucker named this after himself to let you know that if you're on this platform, you're going to be working for him. So it even says here, join Tucker team, unlock all new shows from Tucker and his team, exclusive interviews and investigations, trusted news commentaries, a direct line to Tucker and his team. Join now. By subscribing, you are agreeing to our terms of service and privacy policy. Had to say that part. So it just, this reminds me of something Oprah would do, because Oprah liked to name stuff after herself, but he wasn't playing around. So if you continue to look at it, it says must see videos. So right now, I think it's just him. Yeah. It's uncensored Owen Schroyer. There's Tucker Carlson Encounter, John Daly. There's the Dana White interview. Right now, it's just him, and that's because it just launched, obviously. But the most powerful interviews around the world, which is probably true because he's talked to some pretty high-profile people. So it says, fascinating people head to our cabin for real conversations. Is that Kid Rock? Is that Kid Rock? I think that is Kid Rock. Ball with the ball, the bang, diggy, 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 said the boogie, said up, jump the boogie. My name is Kid Rock. Sorry. And then there's the tour. Says Tucker in Hungary. I think this is Florida. Also Hungary again, Las Vegas. So what happens if I click? Let me see. Do I have to pay? Okay, so some things you don't have to pay for. Like right now, you can watch this. And then it says, what is TCN? I don't want to play this because I might get copyright. I don't know. And it says it is a new streaming platform that is home to exclusive all new content from Tucker Carlson. We will regularly be releasing new video content that tells the stories that matter and helps you make sense of the world around you. Because sometimes website videos have copyright. That's why I'm not playing it. And he talks about why they found it. He's talking about democracy can't function in a society like this. He's talking about repression and control. Join the movement. And then it says, watch Tucker so you can see uncensored encounter the interview. TC Shorts, ask Tucker after the interview, sworn enemy tour, Tucker Carlson films. So I wonder if that's what I was wondering, like if he's going to allow other platforms to come to this network as well. I don't know. I guess we'll have to wait and see, but it's posted. There it is. Let's go to some of the comments here. Soul says, what happened to Panquake? Honey, I have no idea. I mean, I have the same question. I thought Panquake would be out by now. So I don't know what's going on with that. I know they were still trying to raise money, but I thought that would have been here by now. Thank you so much for the super sticker regime. Wild Alchemical Spirit says, it's all about going independent these days and starting your own subscription. And guess what? It's all going to be digital and on the blockchain eventually, and will all tie in with digital currency. Whoa, interesting. Bad Cookie said YouTube did the same thing with PewDiePie and Markiplier. Yeah, my sister watches Markiplier. I know they did like promote him. That's a good point, Bad Cookies. Multimind says Sabby Sabs PDB offered 100 million to Tucker and others willing to, no doubt. That's a lot. Thank you for the super chat, Dijon. Hi, Sabby. Did you hear the Elon, Vivek Tate, and Alex Jones go left? I listened to part of that Twitter space. And thank you, Sparky. True about Canada. If you call a Canadian suicide hotline, they encourage you to follow through with it. What? The 1970s movie Soylent Green is coming true in Canada. Okay. I may have to check that out. Yikes. We're ready for part 2 for the Tight VNC, Eric. Man, what's going on with Canada? Can you tell me? Okay. What is going on with Joe Biden and Donald Trump? Because apparently now Donald Trump is beating Joe Biden in swing states. Democrats are scared. They're scrambling and they're like, what are we going to do? Let's go into this first clip here from Case Study QB. New CNN poll shows that Trump leads Biden in key swing states, Michigan and Georgia. Again, I actually don't think Georgia is a swing state. I think Georgia is a red state. I think Bill Clinton was actually did he win Georgia? I have to go back and check. But I think that Georgia is still a red state. I think that Biden got lucky because there were a lot of non-voters that were registered. They did come out to support Joe Biden in Georgia, particularly those Atlanta suburbs. So you had a lot of people come out there. But I don't think that made Georgia a swing state. I really don't. I think Georgia is still a red state. Let's get into it.
Tonight, Donald Trump holding a commanding and widening lead in Iowa, just 5 weeks before the state opens the 2024 Republican presidential contest.
Thank you, everybody.
The former president crossing a new threshold, with 51% of Republicans now backing him, according to a new Des Moines Register poll. That's up from 43% in October. The shrinking GOP field has boosted Trump, who now holds a 32-point lead.
So Donald Trump has increased from that 43%. In October, he was at 43%. He's now at 51% in Iowa. What happened October 7th? Now, don't get me wrong. I think Donald Trump would also fund Israel as well, just like Joe Biden is. Don't get me wrong. But I believe these are some of the people turning away from Joe Biden because of what's happening in Gaza. Remember, Iowa, not everybody in Iowa is Republican or a Democrat. There's a good amount of independents there as well. Also could have something to do with Joe Biden choosing to remove Iowa and New Hampshire as the first primary states. Pay attention, folks.
The race for second place is a showdown, with Ron DeSantis at 19%, followed by Nikki Haley at 16%.
He's his own worst enemy by not being able to control his mouth. And that has consequences for governance and us being able to get things done.
On a weekend Iowa campaign swing, DeSantis and Haley sharpening their attacks on Trump's record.
We know that the economy was good under Donald Trump, right? But what we need to also remember was we went $9 trillion in debt during that same time, and we are paying the price for that.
Nearly half of likely Iowa caucus goers say their minds are made up. But among Trump supporters, 70% say they are firmly committed in their
70% of Trump supporters are firmly committed for Donald Trump in Iowa. 70%. The problem is Joe Biden doesn't have firm commitment. Now, don't get me wrong. There are also the Democrat voters that are just going to vote for the Democrat nominee, regardless of who it is. You always have those people in both parties, right? But does Joe Biden have a poll somewhere in one of these states that shows 70% are firmly committed to voting for him? Woo!
decision.
The first guy that ever got indicted whose poll numbers went up.
The former president is increasingly turning his focus to President Joe Biden, as new CNN polls show fresh signs of warning for the White House. In Michigan and Georgia, 2 of the 5 states Biden turned from red to blue, the president is facing alarmingly low approval ratings. Our poll showing fewer than 4 in 10 approve of his performance in office.
Let's go back to that. They moved that kind of quickly. Biden approval rating in Georgia is 39%. That doesn't surprise me. I still call Georgia a red state. Michigan, his approval is 35%. Now, that's the state that's going to be a big problem for Joe Biden. He needs to win Michigan in order to win. Remember, some of the Muslim voters have decided to pull away from Joe Biden. They said they're not going to support him because of the way that he's handling the situation with Israel and Gaza. That could be part of that effect that you're seeing in Michigan. You have to remember Rashida Tlaib, again, is from Michigan. She has a very solid base there that will stand by her. This is not good. Is not good.
Performance in office.
I will save democracy. The threat is crooked Joe Biden. That's the threat.
In Michigan, Trump leads Biden 50 to 40% in a hypothetical head-to-head matchup, with 10% saying they wouldn't support either candidate.
See this? So this 10% that says neither, this is where some of the third party votes may come in, right? So these are some of the people that may support RFK Jr., Jill Stein, Claudia De La Cruz. If PSL's in Michigan, I double check. Claudia De La Cruz and Cornel West, that's where they may go, those 10% people. But Donald Trump is beating Joe Biden. Donald Trump has 50% support in Michigan. 50%. Biden has 40%. Remember, Biden won Michigan in 2020. That's wild, son. I know it's still early, but that's a 10% difference. It's not even like 50% and like 48. It's a 10% difference. That's how bad Joe Biden has messed up.
That raises the question of a threat from a third-party contender. Asked specifically about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Cornel West in Michigan, Trump falls to 39%.
Jesus Christ. You see this? You see the effect? So when RFK and Cornel West enter into this poll, Donald Trump has now dropped to 39%, from 50% to 39%. Joe Biden fell from 40% to 31%. RFK Jr. has 20% in Michigan. Cornel West has 6% support. Notice how these are the independents. So they don't have Jill Stein on this poll. I'm not sure if she was included in this poll or if she's under 6% and they just didn't include her name because she's under a certain percentage. But this is very telling, ladies and gentlemen, very telling.
And Biden to 31%. And in Georgia, Trump has a 49 to 44% edge over Biden, the poll found, with 7% saying they would not back either.
That doesn't surprise me again with Georgia. I expect for Trump to have the lead in Georgia. Like I said, I think 2020 was really a one-off. But that right there does not surprise me. That's 7% there. You know, someone can come in and grab that, right? One of those independent or third-party candidates can come in and grab that 7%.
They would not back either. The challenges for Biden are coming into sharper view.
Trump just talks the talk. We walk the walk. Frankly, he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about.
Among the many factors that could drive the race are Trump's numerous legal challenges, particularly the criminal charges for his efforts to overturn the 2020 election. In Georgia and Michigan, nearly half of voters say that if true, they should disqualify him from the presidency.
So the president was campaigning in Philadelphia tonight at a fundraiser, and just a short time ago, he said that the fundamentals of democracy are at stake in the election, really trying to change the subject from the economy. And that is one of the central issues why he is struggling so much at this point in Georgia and Michigan. But Wolf, long before we ever know if there will be a rematch between Trump and Biden, the Iowa caucus is 4 weeks from tonight. As of now, Donald Trump does have a commanding lead in the race. There's no doubt about it. All eyes are on the race for second place, which is still between Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis.
Well, guys, this is a very telling moment, a very telling moment. Now, it goes on because I want you to see how Morning Joe reacted to this news. So this is interesting expressions here from Mika. Let's go ahead and bring them in here as well. And remember, I want to remind you about Georgia. Remember when Joe Biden spoke to voters in Georgia and said, if you put Warnock and Ossoff in office, I'll make sure you get those $2,000 checks. And then he shortchanged the people.
To brand new polling out of Iowa on the Republican field for president. Joining us now from the big board, NBC News national political correspondent Steve Kornacki. Steve, what do the numbers show?
Yeah, we're basically almost exactly 35 days, almost exactly a month until the Iowa caucuses. What we're going to show you, our brand new NBC News Des Moines Register poll. The Des Moines Register poll is taken by Ann Selzer. She is known as one of the best in the business and certainly the authority when it comes to polling on Iowa. So let me show you these numbers. Republican side for the Iowa caucuses. We now have Donald Trump leading with an outright majority in Iowa, 51%. Ron DeSantis, a very distant second at 19. Nikki Haley, 16. Ramaswamy and Christie at 4.
I don't know why Krispy Kreme is still in the race at the 4%. I think at this point he needs to drop out. I don't know what happened to Vivek. Vivek was actually polling double digits at one point. And since that first debate, he just seems to have decreased quite significantly, actually. I honestly can't believe Ron DeSantis is even sitting at 19%. Some of that could come from donors. You know, he is backed by big money. They've been heavily promoting him. That's actually who they want. They don't want Donald Trump. And Nikki Haley sitting at the 16%. Last
polled Iowa in October, also with the Des Moines Register. Since then, look at this, Donald Trump's lead. He has added 8 points to his total. Wow. DeSantis up a couple. Haley, who had been moving flat. I think it's significant because in the month leading up to this poll, you had Ron DeSantis pick up the endorsement of the governor of Iowa, the endorsement of a key evangelical leader in Iowa, got a lot of press attention for completing a 99-county tour of Iowa, had a Fox News debate against Gavin Newsom in front of millions of Republican-leaning voters, and was part of that fourth Republican debate last week. that Donald Trump wasn't in. So for all those things that we thought might be giving DeSantis a boost over the last month, it is Trump. Despite not participating in the debates again, it's Trump who's made the big gains. Trump who's moved to 51% in this Iowa poll. Just a couple other numbers we can show you behind this. These are evangelical voters in Iowa. Remember, Donald Trump finished third with this group in 2016 when he ran in Iowa and lost. Now he leads it overwhelmingly, exact same number as what he gets overall. Evangelicals could make up 2 out of every 3 caucus goers in Iowa. That was the case the last time around. Where Trump really turns it on, though, it is first-time caucus goers. This tends to be a younger group overall. Look at that.
Holy smokes. These are the young voters, guys. The first-time caucus goers in Iowa, 63% with young voters. That's Donald Trump. He's appealing more to young voters than Joe Biden is, guys. Look at this. That is wild.
63% of folks who say for the first time they're going to go to a caucus are rallying behind Donald Trump. This is independents. Independents are a small share of the Iowa electorate, but I think it gets to the basic problem Nikki Haley has. Look how much better Nikki Haley does among independents. It's true in Iowa. It's true in New Hampshire. It is true in every poll we have seen. But in Iowa and in most of these Republican primary and caucus states, big exception being New Hampshire, independents are going to be outnumbered significantly by core Republicans. Haley has yet to show that she can make the inroads she needs with core Republicans.
So that's interesting that independents are feeling Nikki Haley in Iowa. Interesting. I would have thought more independents would lean towards Vivek Ramaswamy because of his position about America first and not funding and supporting these wars. I actually would have thought, because similar like RFK Jr., right? Like a lot of independents like RFK Jr. because he doesn't want to support this war in Ukraine. I think that I would have assumed that they would have actually leaned more towards Vivek Ramaswamy. That's interesting.
That is to say, Republicans who like Donald Trump. She's yet to show she can make those inroads to be competitive. Also, in terms of enthusiasm, we asked folks, are you extremely enthusiastic about your choice? Trump, look at that, 2-1, 3-1 advantage over his rivals. We asked folks, is your mind made up? 77 out of 10% of Trump voters in Iowa say their minds are made up. Again, more than double that of any of his nearest rivals. And then we asked this question here, a lot of words. This is about electability and Republicans' perception of it here. We've talked so much in 2023 about Donald Trump's trials. We will continue to talk about it in 2024. But we asked folks, can Donald Trump win the election regardless of his legal challenges? Now, nearly 3 out of 4 Republicans in Iowa say yes. Last month, that number wasn't even 2 out of 3.
That's how bad Joe Biden has been. See, I hope that this is a wake-up call for the Democratic Party. This is how bad Joe Biden has been for the American people. 73% said they think that Donald Trump can still win against Joe Biden regardless of his legal challenges. That's a significant amount of people. 73%. That's how bad. This is what I've been trying to tell people. The economy is a mess. Just because you created jobs that you won't tell people what these jobs are, how much they're paying, if they include benefits, etc. That doesn't mean that people are making a living wage. The economy is still in the pits. We still have inflation.
Big jump there for Trump. We also said, hey, are Trump's legal challenges too much? They make it nearly impossible for him to win. 24% saying that. Again, that number was over 30 last month. So all sorts of signs in this poll, Mika, showing that Donald Trump over the last 6 weeks in Iowa has actually improved his position. And the last time we were this close to the caucuses, again, just about a month away, that a Republican candidate had a lead anywhere near this size, you got to go all the way back to George W. Bush. The year was 2000. Bush won the caucuses. Bush won the nomination.
He sure did. Look at the look on Mika's face. Mika does not like this.
NBC's Steve Kornacki, thank you very much for bringing those numbers just as they break this morning. We appreciate it. Elise Jordan, given given the rights of women or the lack thereof in this country right now due to the moves made by Donald Trump, Leonard Leo, and his cronies. What do you make of these numbers? What is going on? And I understand this is Iowa we're talking about, but still, look at what's happening.
I don't think this is a time that you're going to be able to use the rights of women, because the thing is, the Supreme Court actually passed that back over to the states. So depending on which state you live in, you might be fine. See, this is the thing. And I think the Democratic Party has been heavily relying on a woman's right to choose to get voters to come out and support them. But now that this is passed back over to the states, some of these states actually, through ballot measures, have already secured that. So I don't think you can rely on just that anymore, Mika.
And you look at how in Iowa, this is a block of very conservative, primarily evangelical voters who dominate the caucuses. And so for Donald Trump, what he did with the Supreme Court and the judges he appointed benefits him in Iowa. It's not until you get to other states, and particularly New Hampshire is going to be more interesting, where you see where voters are more libertarian and they don't like the idea of doctors being able to not dictate the life-saving measures needed to perform medical care to patients, because this is a debate about health care at the end of the day and about personal liberty and personal freedom. And you're going to see that in the Granite State come more to play and potentially be a little bit more of a factor.
Yeah. And another thing I want to add too, for people who may not be aware, I believe, if I remember correctly, Marianne Williamson is on the ballot in New Hampshire. RFK Jr. is polling pretty well in New Hampshire. So I don't think the numbers will be good for Joe Biden in New Hampshire either. But she's right in reference to they tend to be a little bit more libertarian. They don't like the government kind of telling them what to do. So it's I don't know, man.
Steve noted it's remarkable Trump's surge in popularity among evangelicals who were pretty skeptical of him back in 2016, and now he's never been more popular with them. So, John Hallman, yes, New Hampshire could be a little different. It's a different electorate than we see in Iowa. That's where I think the Haley camp thinks they'll fare better. We know Chris Christie has his long shot hopes pinned to New Hampshire as well. But as we look at these numbers, 51-9.
Why would you mention Chris Christie? You know, Chris Christie, he's a friend of MSNBC. He's at the bottom in all these polls. Why would you mention him? And he didn't mention Vivek at all. And Vivek is above Chris Christie. Yeah. Think about that for a second.
19. In a state that Trump previously didn't do all that well. Are we kidding ourselves to think this is even a race at all? This is just simply a foregone conclusion that Donald Trump will be the nominee.
Who's we?
I mean, I think it's been over this for months.
Yeah, you and I aren't in a different place about this. We want to. It's democracy, right? We want to let these things play out. We have to have a willing suspension of disbelief.
And voters
we
vote.
see these numbers. Voters vote, and things can change. But it's not like we're sitting here. It's the date, I believe, is December something.
Let me pause here for a second. Did you guys pick up on what he just said about, well, this is a democracy. We want to allow these things to play out. So when it comes to the Republican Party, because they want Donald Trump to lose, they can allow a democracy to actually happen. But when it comes to the Democratic Party, nobody is allowed to challenge Joe Biden. And other states can actually choose to only have Joe Biden on the ballot for the Democratic Party. You catch that? Mm-hmm.
Lost track of that completely. But we're in December now. The Iowa caucuses are a month away. It's not early still. You can't make the argument it's early. There's a lot of yardage on the field. None of that's true. You know, we're not just in the fourth quarter here, but we're getting close to the 2-minute warning in political terms. And there's not a sign anywhere. And again, you hear people occasionally say, well, things are tightening here, tightening there. Nikki Haley's got momentum here or there. Nikki Haley's got some momentum in New Hampshire versus Ron DeSantis. Donald Trump's lead over the field is vast. and in some cases growing. This is the state that Donald Trump and his team have been most worried about. They have been spending their time, have been spending a lot of time there. He's been in Iowa more than he's been in any other state. They've been spending money there. He's doing rallies there. And apparently it's having some effect because, Trump we've just seen him get stronger in this state rather than weaker. And
they had to be absolutely foolish to think that any of those people running against Donald Trump could actually beat him in the Republican primary. They had to be absolutely foolish. I don't know what these people were thinking, but now they're also talking about the fear of the third party candidates. Shout out to Case Study QB for this, where they talk about they're more worried about the third party voters. Listen to this.
And these are not going to ever be Trump voters. So the campaign they're going to have to build is work to bring those young voters back.
The risk is that they don't vote at all, or even more ominously for Biden, you have 10,000 voters or more in Madison, Wisconsin, Ann Arbor, Michigan, who pull a lever for Jill Stein or Cornel West. That is devastating to Biden's coalition.
That's 2016 all over again.
He says it's devastating to Joe Biden's coalition. I would argue Joe Biden doesn't have a coalition. That's part of the problem in the first place. He doesn't really have an actual solid base. He didn't from the very beginning. Those are just people voting against Donald Trump. That's the thing. Hell, as much as I've criticized Bernie Sanders for his craziness, Bernie at least had a base. Joe Biden did not have one. And now we're seeing this play out in real time going into 2024.
More worried about their third party voting than I'm worried about Trump doing.
And the campaign tells me that they are aware of that. And so they don't believe that with black and brown voters and young voters, they can just do traditional get out the vote. They have to do persuasion.
Hear this. Listen to what she's saying, what they got to do with black and brown voters, right? And you got a black guy sitting there. Listen to this.
Black and brown voters and young voters, they can just do traditional get out the vote. They have to do persuasion.
They have to persuade us. They're saying all the quiet parts out loud. All of them. They got to persuade us. We have to be persuaded. So they're going to try to trick us and make us believe that Joe Biden has actually been helping us out when he hasn't. Why would you have to persuade me if Joe Biden has done a good job? It's just, that was a bad place to pause this. It doesn't make any sense.
Active persuasion to remind voters about things like the trouble spots you mentioned, economic issues.
And but also, go ahead. Really quickly, but also, look, I came out of the field with a poll 2 weeks ago, and this is what actually helps him, right? It's the comparison to Trump. When I ask African-American voters, talking about African-American voters, a closed-in list of what's the greatest threats to the African-American community: inflation, crime, the re-election of Donald Trump. Re-election of Donald Trump by a plurality of African-American voters think that that's the greatest threat to the African-American community. Not inflation, not crime, but Donald Trump.
And that's a motivator?
That's a motivator.
Wow, these people, these pundits that they bring on, they have no idea. Part of this has to do with Gaza. Listen to this. This is from Last American Vagabond. Biden says the Israeli government doesn't want a two-state solution. The truth is they never have. That's always been clear if you simply listen to what they've publicly said in Israel, as opposed to what the U.S. government has always claimed they wanted. So he's shouting out this message here, which says Biden tells donors Israel is losing support. Netanyahu must change his government. And we'll go into this here because actually Reuters did the same thing. Biden says Netanyahu must change. Israel is losing global support. And Joe Biden is also losing support, as we just saw from the numbers. Just going to read a little bit of this here. It says President Joe Biden said on Tuesday that Israel is losing support over its indiscriminate bombing of Gaza and that Benjamin Netanyahu should change, exposing a new rift in relations with the Israeli prime minister. Biden's remarks made to donors to his 2024 re-election campaign were his most critical to date of Netanyahu's handling of Israel's war in Gaza. They are a stark contrast to his literal and political embrace of the Israeli leader days after Hamas militants' October 7th attack on southern Israel. Israel's security can rest on the United States, but right now it has more than the United States. It has the European Union. It has Europe. It has most of the world. Europe. Biden's putting this on you now and saying it's your turn. It is your turn to help. But they're starting to lose that support by indiscriminate bombing that takes place. See, now this number has changed again. Israel's retaliation against the Hamas attacks has killed 18,000, Gaza officials say, wounded 50,000, and created a humanitarian crisis. Correction, there was already a humanitarian crisis in Gaza before October 7th. We know this. The UN had declared that prior to this, and so did human rights organizations. Corrected it for you, Reuters. It goes on to say Biden alluded to a private conversation in which the Israeli leader said, "You carpet bombed Germany, you dropped the atom bomb, a lot of civilians died." Oh no, shots rang out. It's Biden versus Netanyahu. Netanyahu's trying to clap back. Biden said he responded, yeah, that's why all these institutions were set up after World War II to see to it that it didn't happen again. Don't make the same mistakes we made in 9/11. There's no reason why we had to be in a war in Afghanistan. Oh, snap. You see what's happening, folks? Biden and yet not getting along now. Not getting along. Ouch. Again, I don't believe that push from Biden would have even happened had it not been for all the protests. Let's go to some of the comments. Man, I tell you. Thank you, Sparky. If you're homeless in Canada, not even old or sick, social workers try and talk you into it. It's cheaper for Canada than Social Security or Medicare. This is wild. I have to look that up. Thank you, Cool Blue. Election 2024 is shaping up for a red wave. Pickups for the U.S. president and control of the U.S. Senate. Hold for U.S. House. Biden's job approval is too low. Cool Blue has been really good about trying to determine whether or not a political position is going to turn over to another party coming in the next election. Thank you for the super sticker, EB. Think it's EB. Thank you, Flower Bro. The Hood Squad and PSL led a protest at Meta HQ tonight, protesting Meta's censorship of Israel's genocide of Palestinians. Menlo PD tried to intimidate and disperse the crowd, but everyone held their ground. Thank you for letting me know that, Flower Bro. I'll have to check that out. I'm pretty sure it's on Twitter. Thank you, Cool Blue. 2024, Trump can flip from 2020 Biden. Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. Any worse? Think New Hampshire, Minnesota, New Mexico, and statewide Maine. Looking at, say, 30 to 35 states. Someone clip that or take a screenshot of this because we'll come back to this come 2024. Thank you, Muhammad. Great reporting and discussion, Sabby. Thank you. Thank you. Mike says Sabby is my favorite indie. Oh, thank you, Michael. I'm assuming you're Michael. Thank you, Cool Blue. 2024 Republicans would win the U.S. popular vote first time since 2004. Diminished raw vote margins in state, Biden won by over +1 million. California, New York, Massachusetts, Illinois, Maryland, and Washington states. Thank you, Sparky. They may go old school and use whip persuasion. Damn, Sparky. Thank you, Cool Blue. Polls are so bad for Joe Biden, there is no third party spoiler. What people are saying in the polls is they will not vote to reelect Joe Biden. Very telling, guys. And thank you for the super sticker, Dijon. Thank you so much. We are moving on to our final story tonight. And that is about Bill Ackman. You may have noticed on that thumbnail, he is next to Jeffrey Epstein. Now, recently, I talked about Bill Ackman's involvement in pressuring Harvard, MIT, and the University of Pennsylvania to basically change their free speech policies, to resign, and to condemn the protests that have come from the students in reference to supporting the Palestinian people. He's also the one that said from the river to the sea, an intifada was calling for the elimination of Jewish people. I've told you before that is not the case. But then someone sent me something. Someone sent me something else about Bill Ackman that I don't think people knew, how he has also pressured these colleges before, and that is in reference to Jeffrey Epstein. Oh, honey, get ready. We got the tea tonight. We're first going to get into this interview that he had recently with David Rubenstein about anti-Semitism on campus. Let's start with this, and then we're going to go to the Epstein situation, because I'm going to make a connection here.
One of the institutions you've been very philanthropic with is your alma mater, Harvard. But recently, you've been very public about your criticism of the way Harvard handled the events of October 7th and their aftermath. Could you talk about that now?
The first reaction of a group of 34 Harvard student clubs on the morning after October 7th was to put out a statement saying that Israel was 100% responsible for the acts of Hamas. And my view on that was, that's ridiculous, and that's more than ridiculous, I would say. And these students need to have some, judgment and perspective. You can come out and say, look, I'm very unhappy about Israel's treatment of Palestinians in the West Bank, or you can say, we can talk about the Gaza Strip, but you can't support terrorists, and particularly terrorists that rape and pillage and murder and burn.
Pause here for a second. So let me tell you something here. Here is Bill trying to tell you what you can say. This guy who claims to be pro free speech, he's another one that said he was against censorship, but yet he's trying to tell people what they can and cannot say. He goes on to say that you can say that you have an issue with the way that Israel has handled the West Bank and all that stuff. But why isn't Bill saying that? Why isn't Bill talking about that side of the story? Why is he only talking about what happened October 7th? Ask yourself that question. This guy is a billionaire, hedge fund guy. There's different types of billionaires. Some of them are inventors, but this guy didn't invent shit. He's basically just making money off of someone else's money. That's it. That's it. Let's go on.
Burn and take hostages. Well, I got a text from a CEO in my industry. He's like, Bill, the people at Harvard. I'd like to know who the students are behind these clubs, so I make sure I don't inadvertently hire them. And so I tweeted out that sort of made that point.
I don't think they would want to work for you, Bill. The ego of this guy, the ego. Let me know who the students are so I don't hire them. What makes you think they want to work with you?
And caused a bit of a firestorm, and I got a lot of pushback. Why are you picking on students? And I said, look, you can't hide behind a corporate entity if you're going to support terrorism. That's a major decision. So that was sort of my first initiative, if you will, at Harvard. And then, there were protests on campus, and the protests were supportive of terrorism and supportive of things like, when you have a group of students shouting intifada, intifada, let's free Palestine and from the river to the sea. The meaning of intifada means to kill Jews.
No, it does not. The meaning of that means to resist. So you see, he started a lot of this. This is what I was telling you guys. This guy has a lot of followers on Twitter. He was the one that got the ball rolling. And here he is blatantly lying. Free Palestine doesn't call for the elimination of Jewish people. Free Palestine means call for the elimination of the oppression and occupation of the Palestinian people. He knows this. This guy is not stupid. Why is he telling this lie? I'm going to show you.
Raised this issue, Harvard said, well, we have a commitment to free speech, and that's why we have to allow this. Well, there's certain speech that is certainly permissible under the First Amendment. And then there's certain speech that I would say is undesirable on a campus.
Have you said you're not going to donate to Harvard anymore? Or have you said, I'm not going to hire people from these Harvard students anymore, or people like those people?
No. Well, one, we're not going to hire anyone that supports terrorism in Pershing Square. I haven't made any statements.
Remember what he said. We're not going to hire anyone who supports terrorism, right? Okay, because I'm going to show you what he supported.
Statements about, economic support for Harvard. I want Harvard to do the right thing. I don't want to threaten one way or another. That's not my kind of approach. But I do think Harvard needs to do a deep examination of, one, there's been a meaningful rise in anti-Semitic incidents on campus.
So you're going to continue to be involved in this issue and try to push Harvard to do what you think they should be doing.
So he says there's a rise of anti-Semitism on campus, totally leaves out that there were Palestinian students that were shot in Burlington, Vermont. You see what he's doing?
Absolutely. I wrote a pretty thoughtful letter that was, I think 25 million people saw it on Twitter. And remarkably, I did not get a response, which to me is a very, very bad and weak approach. Literally no response, no acknowledgement, no, dear Bill, I hear what you're saying, but nothing. So
why do they owe you a response? Why do they owe him a response? You know how many times, how many letters Harvard receives? You know how many people write to Harvard or write to the president of these universities? But Bill somehow believes that he, out of all the letters that come across their desk, he is owed a response because he's a Harvard alum, because he's a billionaire. How dare you ignore the letter that I wrote you? Out of all those 500 letters that you probably receive a day, how dare you not respond to my letter?
So, yes, I'm an activist, but my activism today is probably not in the corporate boardroom. It's on campus, and this is not just a Harvard problem. It's an NYU problem. It's a University of Pennsylvania problem. The more I examine the issue, the more woke, the more left-leaning the institution, the more anti-Semitism, which is a very unfortunate thing.
One of the institutions.
See what people have done? This is why we tried to warn you guys about this over at RBN, how people were using this woke word too much and they were overusing it. Now it's gotten to the point where they can say anything is woke, right? Okay. He told you he is now an activist on campus. So see, he's trying to get to the student. He's trying to get to them when they're young. Let me go ahead and indoctrinate them now before they get out into corporate America. Let me reach them while they're in school. Okay. So Bill Ackman also apparently was trying to tell MIT what to do when it was announced that Jeffrey Epstein was arrested. Oh, honey, we got the receipts tonight. Look at this. Someone sent this to me. The last email Bill Ackman wrote to MIT was advising them to please try to obscure his wife's relationship to Jeffrey Epstein. Why are these people connected? You got RFK, Jeffrey Epstein. Bill Ackman donates to RFK's campaign. You got Bill Ackman connected to Jeffrey Epstein. Why are these people connect? Let's look at the email. Because Eric blew this up so we could see it a little bit better. Because I want you to read through this with me. We're going to all follow along. I used to tell this to students, let's follow along. Here's the email from William Ackman, that's him, to Neri Oxman, that's his wife. And the CC here is Joy Ito. We'll get into who Joy Ito was. Remember, guys, I worked at MIT. So we're about to get into some of this. This was August 20th, 2019. Joy Neri forwarded your email to me. I would please ask that you copy me on all Epstein-related communications going forward, as I and members of my legal and communication teams are working to help her. And Neri already has enough on her plate breastfeeding a 3-month-old baby, a very beautiful one, I might add, without a baby nurse until early September. Oh, dear God, you ain't got no baby nurse. He mentions this as though women haven't been doing this for years with no baby nurse, no nanny, no nothing. I'm a special case. Forward all Epstein-related communications to me. Our advice on handling the recent press requests. Now here is Bill Ackman trying to tell MIT what to say to the press. I would suggest that on background that you let the press know that Epstein did not receive a disobedience award, but he, like other donors to the lab, and the donor names were redacted here, although I would, of course, not mention their names, received a gift from the Media Lab of a unique design object. I don't think it is necessary for you to say it was at your request, which, as I understand in this case, it was. But it is very important that you don't mention Neri's name. You guys hear this? Billionaire telling Joy Ito from MIT's Media Lab, when the press comes to you to talk about Jeffrey Epstein and his arrest, don't mention my wife's name. Or otherwise get her involved, or she will have to issue her own statement to protect her reputation, explaining why it was sent and at whose request. Who else received similar gifts, how she met Epstein, who else at MIT received funding from Epstein, why she declined to attend meetings and dinners with Epstein, which other faculty attended. That sounds like a threat to me. Don't mention Neri's name or else she's going to tell on these other people. Is this blackmail? This will, of course, blow this up even more, which we would certainly not like to see happen. Although I don't think it's necessary to mention this. According to Neri, the gift Epstein received differed from the disobedience award, as it had going on to page 2. That's why I asked Eric to blow this up, because I wanted you guys to be able to read this along with me. As it had a different base, the orb had a different pattern, and it did not come with a certificate, among other differences. The fact that Neri, as the designer of the Media Lab, was asked to produce nearly all, if not all, physical gifts for donors, using her and her students' time and resources at either your or Raphael's office, Nina or Jess' request, is not a good reason for Neri to be outed as the supplier to Epstein. Raphael was the president of MIT at that time. That's who he's referring to there. Because of Neri's profile, her upcoming MoMA show, and the large amount of recent media about her, she would be an appealing target for the press, as I'm sure you understand. Ain't this some shit? Listen to this. To be clear, Neri's interests are not adverse to you, the Media Lab, or MIT, but I don't want to see her forced into a position where, to protect her name, she is required to be transparent about everything that took place at MIT with Epstein. What took place at MIT with Epstein? What's he talking about? Once her name appears in the press, she will face a barrage of questions, and anything other than perfect transparency to the media will make her look like she is hiding something. This has regretfully become a witch hunt, as I'm sure you already understand. Neary has nothing to hide about the Epstein situation, but would rather stay quiet unless she is forced to do otherwise. We will be on a flight beginning at 10:30 Eastern until 7 p.m., but I am reachable before if you would like to discuss this further or possibly by email during the flight. Thank you, Bill. Now, let's talk about Joi Ito. Joi Ito, he's a Japanese entrepreneur and venture capitalist. He is the president of the Chiba Institute of Technology, and he is the former director of the MIT Media Lab, former professor of practice of media arts and sciences at MIT, and a former visiting professor of practice at Harvard Law School. So he did step down. When this came out, he stepped down. Following the exposure of his personal and professional financial ties to sex offender and financier Jeffrey Epstein, Ito resigned from his role at MIT, Harvard, the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, the Knight Foundation, Pure Tech Health, and the New York Times Company on September 7th, 2019. So he was even part of the press. Let's go back and remind you what happened. Okay. MIT investigates alleged connection to Jeffrey Epstein. Listen to this. I just want to take you back. Because, see, I remember all of this.
In the latest fallout connected to Jeffrey Epstein, MIT is opening an investigation into its ties to the financier and convicted sex offender. The announcement came just one day after the New Yorker revealed that MIT's Media Lab was attempting to conceal donations from Epstein. The school had previously said it accepted $800,000 from his foundations over a 20-year period. But according to the magazine, the director of MIT's Media Lab, Joichi Ito, had accepted nearly $2 million from Epstein without properly reporting it. Following the bombshell report, the university's president announced Ito's resignation and described accepting Epstein's donations as a, quote, mistake of judgment. NBC News spoke to Signe Swenson, a former MIT employee who said she resigned in 2016 in part because of her discomfort about the lab's relationship with Epstein.
You see this, guys? You see what's coming out? See, I don't think everybody saw this at that time. Again, I worked at MIT, so I knew a little bit more I heard about the story more often in reference to Epstein and MIT because it's local news to me. But this is very telling. The woman that's coming on now, she resigned in 2016 because she was uncomfortable with the relationship that they had with Jeffrey Epstein. A lot of people were uncomfortable. Bill Gates' wife said she was uncomfortable. You know, people just not uncomfortable for no reason.
In my first position working at MIT, part of my job was to research the prospects for the top-rated donors or potential donors to MIT. And I looked at Epstein's record, found his conviction, but at that time, he was not somebody MIT was supposedly actively cultivating. So
just remember, Jeffrey Epstein at this point had already been convicted before. That was a prior conviction. So they still chose to do business with him even after that.
So I just made note of it. But then when I started conversations with the MIT Media Lab about the position that I was applying for, it was explained to me that Joi Ito and Jeffrey Epstein had an existing relationship, and that part of my job would be to help aid that relationship along. At many points, and probably nearly every time his name was brought up, I expressed my disgust and discomfort, but it was never my choice or truly anybody's choice but Joi Ito to me.
And they worked with him anyway.
Maintain this relationship. We were expected to keep this quiet at every turn, involving as few people as possible.
Why were they asked to keep it quiet? If there was nothing wrong about it, why were they told to keep it quiet?
He was referred to by just his initials, sometimes a pseudonym, but in general, we were just supposed to avoid other people learning about this. The visit where he came to the lab, we were expected to keep off books as much as possible. Those with money and those with power apparently don't suffer consequences. That specifically in academia and nonprofits all over, people bend over backwards. They look the other way when people are saying or doing terrible things because the money's good. The money will come in.
So one thing I want to mention as well, how do you keep this off the books, right? When Raphael made the statement after Jeffrey Epstein was convicted the second time, when he made that statement, he gave a big speech, press conference at MIT. He said at the time he was an anonymous donor. But they all knew. If you go back and read the email that Bill sent to Joy Ito, you can tell that they all knew. It wasn't anonymous. He mentioned Raphael's name in the email. So that was Raphael lying to the public saying, oh, it was an anonymous donor. We didn't really know. He did know. They all knew.
Signe Swenson's former boss Joichi Ito previously apologized, saying, I take full responsibility for my error in judgment, and said that he saw no evidence of Epstein's alleged criminal actions. Ito has not responded to our request for comment.
Of course he didn't. And by the way, all you had to do was look it up. Like I said, that was a previous conviction there. But let me show you something else here about Bill Ackman, right? See, watch this. This is where I get him on the free speech issue as well. Bill Ackman called Kyle Rittenhouse a civic-minded patriot who acted in self-defense. So let me ask you a question. So first of all, Kyle Rittenhouse was protecting property that night. We talked about this on RBN. He was protecting property. Billionaires like to have property protected, right? Whether you feel like he shouldn't have been there, whatever, etc. One thing they were able to prove in court is they said, well, the people came after him first and he acted in self-defense. However, why is it that Bill Ackman felt that it was okay for Kyle Rittenhouse to defend himself, and so much to the point where he will call him a civic-minded patriot, but he's out here on Twitter and going into these interviews calling the students that are protesting for the Palestinian people, he's calling them thugs. They haven't shot anybody. They haven't assaulted anybody, but they're thugs, according to Bill Ackman. A little bit here, you'll see. Ackman is no stranger to controversy in the financial world. As a shareholder activist, his New York-based firm takes stakes in companies and then often pressures their leaders to make changes or face proxy fights. Pershing Square has almost $22 billion in assets under management, including a special purpose acquisition company and other funds, according to the firm's website. Here's that tweet here where he called him a civic-minded patriot. So Kyle Rittenhouse can shoot people and he's a patriot, but you can't walk down the street in a march and say free Palestine. You're a thug. Censored Man made the connection. Epstein and Israel. Look at this. Here you have an ex-Mossad agent, Ben Menench, confirmed that both Jeffrey Epstein and his partner in crime, Ghislaine Maxwell, worked for the government of Israel. Their job, blackmailing American politicians, hedge fund managers, and bank managers. Bill's hedge fund. Did they have something on Bill? I don't know. I don't know if Bill was on that island. I don't know if Bill was on that plane. I have no evidence or receipts to prove that. But it makes you wonder. It goes on to say hedge fund managers and bank managers were top priority as they were the donor class and could have politicians alter policy. Because, as we all know, corrupt politicians like nothing more than money. Now you understand why the U.S. is so pro-Israel. Epstein would also finance universities, which I just showed you, primarily targeting their research and experimental development R&D sectors. He would do this because often universities would cooperate with the private sector on new science and technology. This is true. Epstein would gather this information and give it to Israel. This is why Israel's influence on America is so great. Everybody making the connection now? This is something also that Whitney Webb has also spoken about. Israel literally used child abuse in order to influence both U.S. domestic and foreign policy. Jeffrey Epstein, the world's most infamous pedophile, was a tool used by the Israeli government. Is this really a nation you want to support? Again, this is not about Jewish people. This is about the government. Furthermore, a client list compiled by, let me hover over this here, Rye Liberty, who researched Epstein and his clients more than anyone, lists 4 former prime ministers of Israel. Every name on that list with the flag next to them was once the head of their nation. 4 prime ministers of Israel, 1 prime minister of the UK, 1 president of the United States, 21 billionaires. And Bill is one of those billionaires. Epstein had the world's most powerful people compromised. And all of this was so that Israel gained more and more power over some of the world's most influential people. Glenn Greenwald called it out as well. The way some people are drooling in gratitude over Bill Ackman using his multi-billion hedge fund wealth to help create no hire blacklist for college students who criticize Israel and dictate to colleges which views they may and may not permit to be heard is creepy. And yes, look at this. People on the right who now see Bill Ackman as a hero might want to look into his role in aggressively promoting lockdowns in March of 2020 and then allegedly reaping profits from the resulting collapse. This should have more likes. It has over 541.4K views. I'm suspicious that it has only that amount of likes. Investor Bill Ackman advises Trump to shut down the country, saying stock market will soar. And actually, Bill Ackman is one of the billionaires that actually was able to increase his wealth during the pandemic. This is why I say you can't have heroes. So for the people out there praising this guy, RFK Jr., this is your friend? Is this your king? Same guy out here promoting lockdown so that he could benefit financially? Is this your king? The point is, these billionaires and some of these millionaires, not all of the millionaires, but these billionaires, they all moved in the same circle, guys. And the circle always seems to come right back to Jeffrey Epstein. Billionaires run this country. They've been running other countries. And Bill Ackman is one of them. A hedge fund manager should not be able to reach into the university and tell employees of the university what to say to the press. So for all the people that still support RFK Jr., ask him if this is his king. Let's go to some of the comments here. Notori says, Sabs, send me all of this, or Eric. Notori, can you send me your email and I can send it to you? Notori's like, what the heck? Thank you, Sparky. Sabby worked at MIT. Epstein donated to MIT. Coincidence? Not with me. Don't look at me. I'm not in any of these billionaire circles. But MIT and Harvard are the largest employers in Cambridge. So there's a lot of people that work there. And we are going to shout out the comment of the night, which I like. Shout out to Frank Johnson. He said, Piers Morgan is from Great Britain and Elon is from South Africa. Roll your eyes. Why are they telling us what free speech is? Well said, Frank. Well said, Frank-a-doodle. Bill Ackman's on Twitter. So, and people have shared that tweet with him. He's seen it. It's not like he doesn't know that's there. I don't know how that person got a hold of that email, but damn. He actually sent it in the email. Well. Yeah, amazing Sabby was able to keep her sanity working at MIT. Yeah, well, I think I was there for like 3 or 4 years at MIT, and then I left. It doesn't matter. All these universities are all about money. All right, guys, that is it for me tonight. I am not live on Thursday. I'm going to see Max Blumenthal's talk at the Community Church of Boston, but there'll be clips for you as well as interview clips that are coming up later this week as well. So I'll be back on Friday. Thank you so much for hanging with me. Yes, of course, I will clip that segment. All these going to be clipped. When it's clipped, make sure you share it. People need to know. All right, guys, have a good night. Keep up the fight.